We start 1 minute early because we have a lot of content to go through. And I mean a lot. And that's why they gave me this session, this slot, right after lunch. Because, you know, if you're going to do some heavy coding and new concepts and everything all together, it's better if you do it after a big meal. So, yeah, I hope you guys stay awake. I will try to keep you awake. So, welcome to this session. This is going to be 1 hour, as I said, of intense programming with Cake. So first, let me ask you, has anyone here heard about Cake? Not Cake PHP. Oh, all right, so we're on the same page. So there is something called Cake PHP, which is a framework. That's not it. It's Cake Build. Well, that's good. All right. So this is about using Cake to automate the build and deployment process of your application running on .NET Core. So question number 2. Is anyone here running an application on .NET Core? Oh, perfect. Well, most of you, so you are the perfect audience for this. First, let me tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Enrico Campidoglio. I work as a freelancer as of September last year, so I'm kind of new at this. But I've been a consultant for almost 2 decades. So, we are not here to talk about the good old days or the new good days. We are here to talk about Cake. So has anyone here played Portal? So you know there is a meme, there is a thing in that game where the cake is a lie, and this is the cake from the game Portal. Sorry, I just had to make that joke because it's part of talking about Cake. So we're not going to talk about this cake, we're going to talk about this cake, the Cake project. So you might wonder, well, most of you already know this, but just in case, you might wonder, what is Cake? Well, Cake is a make-like build tool. However, unlike make, it doesn't have an awful domain-specific language to write scripts in. It has a DSL built on top of C#. So really, if you move those around, it's a C# make. So actually it should be called CS make. But what's the fun in calling something shmake when you can call it Cake? So this is what Cake is. And now, if you're like me and just heard about this, your eyes could be rolling so hard that they're falling onto the back of your head. Because we all know that we already have a few of those tools, make-like tools, apart from make itself, GNU Make. We have these tools, like Apache, Ant, Maven, and Gradle, if you are on the Java space. If you are in the .NET space, or Ruby, you have things like Rake and Fake and Sake and Lake. Do we have Lake? Yeah, with Lua. Yeah, so we have all kinds of these make-like languages. So do we really need another one? Do we really? Well, there are a few things that Cake has going for it that none of these tools have. And I'll give you 3 reasons why Cake is different. The first one is, well, it uses C# to write the build scripts and the deployment scripts in. So if you're a C# programmer, you're going to be like, wait a minute. It's C#. You are already using it to build your application. And hopefully, the next scene is not going to be this. Because this is definitely not C#. It's not Unix either, but that's another story. So, reason number 1 is it's C#. Reason number 2, it's cross-platform. So it can basically run wherever your application runs. And it's cross-platform because Cake itself is built on .NET Core. Number 3, Cake has a gazillion of add-ons that integrate with all kinds of external tools. And you all know that if you're going to automate the build and deployment process, It's all about invoking a series of tools, sending parameters, receiving back the results, and orchestrating that into a process. That's all automation is about. So your build tool better integrate with as many external tools as possible. And when I'm talking about many, I'm not kidding. I mean, Cake has stuff like, Cake, you can invoke from Cake in a native way, stuff like MS-Build, Xbuild, or the .NET Core toolchain, just for compilation. For test, you can invoke XUnit, NUnit. If you're going to run your script in a continuous integration environment, you have integration points for TeamCity, Team Foundation server, AppVeyor or Travis CI, and Jenkins too. You can push packages or download packages from NuGet, or you can do your deployments with Octopus Deploy. You can interact with an IIS observer, create and delete websites. You can interact with Kudu, which is a piece of infrastructure that's built into Azure that makes it easy to deploy and monitor your applications. Then you have stuff like curl, you can send and download files from anywhere, from any URL. It doesn't even have to be HTTP, it could be FTP. And then you can also automate your front end. So you can invoke a gulp script or NPM. All of these things you can do from your Cake script. So this is pretty cool. And the list keeps growing. So, but this is not what we're going to focus on today. No, that's all nice and good, but what we're going to look at is the cross-platform aspect of using Cake. Because as I said before, Cake runs wherever your application does. And this is a very powerful point, because if you have a cross-platform, by the way, I'm quoting myself here. So if you have a cross-platform application where developers might be working on different operating systems, like someone is on a Mac, someone is using Windows, someone might be on Linux, the cool ones, of course, are on Linux. And so they must be able to run the exact same build process as you do. So having a make-like tool that has all those integrations and can run anywhere is pretty powerful. So, the demo, because talk is cheap, show me the code. We are going to use a demo application that's already built and kind of done with tests and everything. And we are going to automate the build and deployment process of that application from scratch with Cake. And we're going to do it on different platforms. So first let me tell about this application. It's called Linker. Sorry, naming is hard. It's one of those like Bitly URL shortening service. So you have a long URL, you paste it into the web interface, and you get a shorter URL back. And then you can navigate to that URL, and you get redirected to the original one. No rocket science. However, it's built on .NET Core, and this is kind of cool. So this is the application we are gonna demo. And how does it work? The UI looks like this. I'm not very good at UIs. So you type an URL, you press shorten, and you get a shorter URL back. Of course, this works way better if I actually had registered a short URL. Last time I looked, the short one-word URLs are pretty expensive. And this is just a demo application. But I did manage to find one. We're going to use it later. So this is how it works. How is it built? Just to give you the context, it's basically an HTTP API that runs on ASP.NET Core. It has a database, actually not really, just an in-memory store, because I had very high ambitions when I started, but then I didn't have enough time. So it's not really a database, it's like a dictionary. But let's pretend it's a database. Then there is a front end, which is just HTML, JavaScript style sheet. It calls the HTTP, it sends the URL to the API, it saves it into the store, and then you can get back a shorter URL. That's it. That's the architecture. And it runs on .NET Core 1.1. Okay? Where are we going to deploy this to? We're going to deploy it to an Azure web app. So this is the context. How is our pipeline going to look like? First, we compile it. For that, we invoke .NET Build, which is the .NET Core compilation tool. Then we're going to run the tests, all 25 of them. And we're going to use .NET Test for that. So these are the tools that our build script is going to invoke, shell out to. Then we're going to package it into one single file. For that, we're going to use .NET Publish, which takes all the files needed by your application, binaries, and as well as the front-end files, and copy them into a directory. And then we take that directory and we zip it. So we have one single package file. After that, we take that package file and we deploy it to Azure. How do we deploy it? Since this is a cross-platform pipeline, we need the most cross-platform way of deploying something to a website, which is, yeah, someone said it, FTP or HTTP. In other words, you just upload it. Okay? And for that, we use, of course, curl, which also runs on Windows and Linux and macOS, and actually Amiga OS even, I checked. So this is the pipeline. Let's get started with this thing. So we are going to develop the build script here on macOS, okay, using VS Code. But we might as well be on Windows using VS Code. Why do I use VS Code? Because it has some nice extensions that make it easier to work with Cake. So if you go to the extension gallery for VS Code, find the Cake plugin, and you get some syntax highlighting, code snippets, and stuff like that. So that's pretty nice. There is also one for Visual Studio, but it's not as nice. So here on the left, we're going to write our build script. And here on the right is a terminal console, which we're going to use to run every step. When we are done, we're going to take all this process and run it in a continuous integration server as well, unchanged. The continuous integration server runs on Linux, all right? And the final application runs in Azure, which is Windows. Cross-platform. Okay, so let's get started. Well, actually, let me show that linker doesn't really exist anymore. So I told you I had registered a shorter URL for it. It's LNKR. Yeah, like this. So if you look at right now, where is it? Can I zoom this in? Zoom in. Well, I'm going to do it there you go. So right now, the website on Azure doesn't have any files in it. Actually, let me further prove it to you that I'm not lying. This is the content of the root of the website on Azure. No files. Completely empty. All right, so let's get started. First thing we need to do, if you remember, we need to compile this application. Okay, so if you're already familiar with the Cake syntax, no, it's a no-brainer. If you're not, it doesn't matter because I'm going to explain the concepts to you as we go along. So the first thing we need to do, what's happening with the keyboard? Oh, there you go. So I told you there are some built-in snippets for VS Code. So you create a Cake task with an action, or you create a Cake task without an action, which is not that useful. So this is how you define a task. You see, this is just a C# method that you're calling, called task, which returns an object which has a does method, the Fluent interface, which takes a lambda, and in the lambda, in the method, in the function there, you define what's going to happen for that task. So it's all C#. We're going to call it compile. And Here we are supposed to invoke an external tool. Now, Cake has this really elegant way of calling external tools. That is, you just invoke them as if they were a C# method. Well, a .NET method. You make a method call, passing parameters like you would normally do. Cake is going to take care of translating those parameters into the correct syntax for the external tool you're invoking. Just all behind the scene. Not only that, is that if you don't have the tool on your machine, it's going to download it for you before you start. And it's going to also take care of concatenating together the right path to the executable, which you all know, if you have ever written a build script, that's the number one pain. I want to say it's a pain. It's being recorded, sorry. So, it's really a pain to concatenate the relative path or the absolute path or whatever you're running your script from into the script. Cake just takes care of it behind the scenes. So what we can do if we're going to invoke .NET build, we just say .NET core build, just as a method. And the first parameter, of course, is the path to the solution file. All right? As easy as that. Now, in order to invoke, wait, we have to do one more thing. This is just a task, nothing is being executed. So we need to say to Cake, run target, which task do you want to run? When I run the script, I want to run this task. Don't forget your semicolons. So this is basically the simplest Cake script you can define. How do you invoke it? We invoke it through a so-called bootstrapper. It's just a shell script that checks, do you have Cake on your machine? If not, let's download it from NuGet. And then let's check that you have all the tools and add-ins that you are referring to. If not, let's download them too from NuGet. And then it's going to invoke the Cake executable and pass the path to your script. So that's what all the bootstrapper does. There is one that's for Bash, and there is one for PowerShell as well. So you don't have to write the bootstrapper yourself. You can just download it. Actually, there is another thing in VS Code that's called boot. You see, there is a, what is this called in VS Code? An action, an installer. So this is basically going to fetch the bootstrapper from GitHub and place it into your working directory. So pretty nice. So let's run this. So you see, it's compiling the script with Roslyn because what Cake is, I don't mind that. What Cake is doing is that it's taking the contents of your build.cake file, parse it as a one long string, and feeding it into Roslyn for compilation, and out you get a binary which you then execute like any other .NET program. Now, why is this failing? Well, this is .NET Core 1.1. And if you just compile it for the first time, you don't have any of your dependencies downloaded. No NuGet packages that you are using in your application have been downloaded. So you need another step before this, which is .NET Restore, which looks at all your .NET packages that you are using and download them from NuGet. How many times can you say NuGet in a sentence? Actually, I heard it's called NuGet. Is it correct? Do you say NuGet or NuGet? All right. Must have been some strange. All right. Okay, so someone does call it NuGet. Nice. Okay, so let's define another task then before this. And let's call it restore and .NET Core restore. So this basically looks in your root directory of the project, looks for packages that you're using, and downloads them. Notice that if we were using .NET Core 2, restore happens implicitly. So you don't need to do it anymore, unless you're old-fashioned. Now, we have two tasks. What's important here is that the restore must happen before compile. So this is where the concept that Make introduced way back when of dependency tracking. You can define individual tasks that do one thing, But then you can say that tasks are dependent on another one that needs to happen before it, one or more. And the tool, when you say you want to run compile, it's going to look at what task do I need to run before compile and run them in order. So you don't need to take care of what is running first. You can just declare them, and then the tool is going to take care of resolving the dependencies. So that's really nice. So how do you do it in Cake? I wish you could say depends on, because does and depends on. Number one mistake that I do all the time, I write depends on, but it doesn't exist. Because when they made Cake, they thought that is dependent on is better. I totally disagree. I would like to write it depends on instead of is dependent on. But we're going to do is dependent on, because otherwise it doesn't work. So we're going to say is dependent on restore. All right, let's run this again. Now it's going to do the restore first, which uses the network. So if you guys are running some kind of torrent seed tracker, it's time to stop it now. All right, so excuse me for the font size. This should be on one line. But anyway, you get the times it took to run those tasks. And it's green, so it's succeeded. So we're basically done with the compile step. No, not that much code. Next up is, do you remember? Are you still awake? I also wrote it ZZ. So, what was after the compile? Publish? That was like the last one. Okay, if you're in a hurry, I can just do publish. Let's just skip everything else. Test, yes, thanks. So, another task. Let's call it test. Now, .NET Core, when you say .NET Core test, it's actually going to do a compile also, unless you pass the no build option, which we're not going to do. So test, what it really is dependent on is, I actually said is dependent on, is restore, not compile. Because the compilation is going to happen automatically. So I'm going to say, I'll just use this. So this is dependent on restore. Now you can guess what the method is. By the way, those in the Cake terminology, those are called aliases. So .NET Core test, and then we need to give it the path to the project, the test project file, which is in test.linker.tests.linker.tests.cs proj semicolon. So, what do you think happens if you run this? Sorry? Yes, thanks. I'm still always running compile. So what we need is actually a way to say from the external script, what task do you want to run this time? Otherwise, it's always going to be compile. Which means we need to pass arguments into our build script from the outside. And that's pretty easy to do, it turns out. So let's go to the top. We define a variable called target. And this is going to be one class. So this is going to be a class field you could think of. It's going to be accessible from all the tasks. So you say var target equals argument, which is another alias, which hides all the parsing of the arguments from the command line and just gives you the result. So what is the name of the argument? It's target. What is the default value? Let's say compile, yeah. Actually, I'm going to reveal a secret. Are you ready for that? The bootstrapper defines its own parameters, the common ones. One of them is target. And the bootstrapper has a default value for that. which is not compiled but is build. So if you want to mirror what the default bootstrap, of course you can go and change the bootstrapper to whatever you like. But if in this case, if we want to mirror what the bootstrapper has as a default value, we should call this build. Turns out that we don't have to change this into build, because build is our default task. It would be nice if, and this is just a design pattern you could call it, it would be nice if we can define a task which does not have an action, a task whose job is to simply define what is the default task that's going to be invoked. So we can change it later without having to rename all the tasks and all the dependencies. So it's kind of a marker task, you could call it, or a grouping task. So let's define this here, and that's where this snippet comes in handy. The task without action, we call it build, which is the default one, and we are going to say that this is simply dependent on compile. And this is our default task. Later, you could keep adding on other dependencies. And here you are defining what's going to happen if you just call the bootstrapper with no parameters. So that's nice. So let's start by invoking the bootstrapper first. With
the double period in the test task.
The double period?
Line 18.
You might have saved me right now. Where is it? Oh, yes. Well, actually, let's take a look. Thank you for pointing that out, so I don't have any surprise and I don't panic. So here, you see, now we have a syntax error. And this is basically just it's the C# compiler telling you that you have a syntax error. So nothing strange. You even have the line number. Of course, off by 1, 0 based. So line 18, no, it is actually line 17. And so you can just correct the error. So another advantage of having build scripts that compile is the compiler. Instead of having a grunt script or a gulp script, which is JavaScript, which notoriously does not compile, you're going to find out those errors by running the script, or over and over. Here, you just get it exactly what the problem is. So another advantage of having a C#-based build DSL. So let's run the test. Compiling the build script, doing the restore, doing the compile. Sorry, I forgot one thing. Now that we have the target variable defined, we also better use it. So we say target here instead. So restore, no compile, running the tests. Blah, blah, blah. It's taking a while. 24 tests they passed. Good. Next step. We're almost done. No, wait, not really. What time is it? Yeah, we have plenty of time. So we are going to package now this application, because we know that it compiles, the test pass, so it must be okay. Packaging also requires another thing, another piece of information. What is that? When you package something, in preparation for deploying it, you might also need a version number. And now this is getting really exciting. I can't contain myself. So where is the version number in .NET Core? No more assembly. Yeah? Yeah, it is in assembly info, but there is another place you could put it. Yeah, in the project file. So in the project file, you can define a kind of a metadata, which is the version number of your application in one single place. So that's pretty nice. What's not nice is that this used to be JSON once upon a time. And now it's XML. Kind of an anticlimax. But what this means is that we can, from our cake script, just parse that value out of the project file to determine what the version is. And since it's XML, how do you extract a value from an XML file? And it's not regex.
Link to it.
Yeah, link to XML is an option, but here let's be cross-platform. XPath, yeah. I don't know, is it better there than regex? I don't know. You tell me. That's what we have. So XPath, that's how we're going to read this value out of the project file. Luckily for us, there is an alias to do that. You could, of course, write just regular C# here, invoking the .NET classes. But let's not do that. There is a better way. So let's define a task. Let's call it version. Now, the alias to run an XPath query onto a file is called XML peek. There is another one called XML poke, where you can set a value on the matching element. So XML peek, this is going to return a value. Let's call it version. Since we're going to need that version in another task later, the publish task, we're going to define it as a script variable, not an argument, but a variable that's accessible from all the tasks. And let's give it the default value of 0.1.0, which is the default semantic versioning version. If you follow the somewhere specification, this is the default unspecified version. So let's go back to where we were before. XML peek, two arguments. First, the file, of course, which is src linker.csproj. And next is the XPath query. Now, are you guys good with XPath? Right. So luckily for me, I think I have a snippet for it, which, I mean, it's not that bad. It's basically following the, should I scroll this up? Yeah. It's following the hierarchy of nodes, going from project, project group, version, and then extract the content. Project, project group, version. Extract the content of that node. Easy enough. Don't forget semicolon. So, and once we have the version, instead of just being silent in our script, because that doesn't output anything, let's print something out to the standard output, just to let us know that this actually worked. And there are actually many built-in aliases to do this kind of stuff. One is information. Now, information, we just pass a string, and it's going to end up into the standard output. What do we want to write? We write detected version, and then we say plus version. I know what some of you are thinking now, and I'm going to get to that. So, detected version, and then the version, to see that. Does this task have any dependencies? No, this can run by itself. So, let's run it. We say version. Let's see if I made any compilation error. No. There you go. Detected version 1.0.0. Okay? Now, you might look at your script now and think, isn't this a little bit too 90s? Or maybe, yeah, in JavaScript, that's the only way maybe you have to do it. But remember, we are running on top of Roslyn. And if you're using the latest version of Cake, we are running on the top of the latest stable release of Roslyn. Which means, all this is to say that you can use C#7 syntax features in your build script, or C#6 or whatever C# version. Now, some of these features are really nice syntactic sugar for example, string interpolation. So you can say this instead. Just put a variable right into the script instead of concatenating it together, which is definitely more elegant than just concatenating. And it's really handy if you're going to build a path. So let's run it again. And there you go, exact same result. All right, moving on. Now it's time to publish this thing. So let's once again define another task with an action. Let's call it package. Package. What do we need before we can package? We need to compile, yeah, and version, yeah. We need these two things. So it's dependent on compile and is dependent on version. So you can chain as many as you like here. All right. Now we're going to use once again the .NET Core tools. We're going to use two of them. One is .NET Core Publish, which takes a few arguments, which I never remember. That's why I have them over here. There you go. So we need the source directory that we want to publish, of course. It's src linker. It's the root directory of the source code. Where do we want to publish it? We publish it into a kind of a middle stage directory that we're going to zip later. So how do you pass this argument? These aliases, sometimes, they usually take at least 1 to 3 arguments just like that. But some tools have a huge number of options you can pass. And what you don't want is just passing them by order like this. So a common convention among these aliases is that you create an object that has all the properties corresponding to the options of the tool. So in this case, we create a new object called .NET Core Publish Settings. And this has an output directory property, which we set to publish. Oh, no semicolon there. Do we need any semicolons? Yeah, we need one here. And actually, let me just put this here. So this is a way of specifying more parameters to an external tool than it will be feasible, but just having them by order. So this is step number 1. Step number 2, we're going to need to put this zip file into a directory. Now, where you put your package could be a parameter of a script, because it's going to be different if you run it locally or if you run it on a build server, for example. So let's have that as an argument of our script. So we say package output path, argument, package output path, default value, dist, or whatever you like. Now let's go back to our task. Now here is another feature. This directory may or may not exist already. So there is an alias built into Cake that's called ensure directory exists. Package output path. All it does is check, does this directory exist? Yes, then I don't do anything. If not, just create makedir, mkdir. Ensure directory exists. Really nice alias. After that, we're going to package this up with zip. What do you think the alias is called? Well, it's called zip. What do we want to zip? We want to zip the package, well, the publish directory, which has all the files, and we want to output a package output path plus linker and the version. You are all with me? We're embedding the version in the file name. Actually, if you want to be really fancy, you could do it this way. Publish, then remove this, like that, right? Publish / linker and version.zip. Sorry, I deleted the first part. we want to say publish, and then I made a mistake here. It should be called package output path. All right, so this is the destination of where we want to put the package, which is a parameter. So let's try this out. Publish. Compiling. Now, one thing about, publish was not found. What line was that? The target. Of course, it's not called publish. It's called package. One thing about Cake is that Roslyn isn't fast. So you notice that as we go through these iterations, it's not as fast as you would like. So, that was really fast. Okay, the compilation is not fast. So you saw that, I know it's a lot of scrolling text, but, well, we are basically compressing all the DLLs. It's not a core, so all the DLLs that you're ever going to need are part of your application bundle. And then we create this file, which has 1.0.0 in the file name. Let's check the dist directory, and indeed, here is our zip file. Okay? Last step, deploy. This is going to need questions. We're going to save them at the end. Yeah, hold on to that. So, deploy. And now this is the point where I ask you again, if you're using the Wi-Fi, please stop whatever you're doing, because I'm going to use the network now. Now, I usually when I do demos, Wi-Fi, conference Wi-Fis are notoriously unreliable, so I run everything locally. That's why I have a local instance of TeamCity and a local Git repo and everything. But I don't have a local Azure. So I'm going to have to use the network for that. So let's define this last task. Let's call it deploy. Task deploy. Now, what are we dependent on before we deploy? Package, yeah. And you just say package, and then package has its own dependencies, and then the chain continues. So that's pretty nice. So here it's getting interesting. Up until now, we have only used aliases that are built into Cake. It comes with the Cake DLL. However, as I told you in the beginning, there is a huge ecosystem of add-ins that add additional aliases onto your context. So you can interact with tools that the Cake team didn't foresee were going to be used. Curl is one of them. Support for curl is not built into Cake. So we're going to use an add-in. How do you use an add-in in a Cake script? Well, you use just a regular C# preprocessor directive, those that start with the hashtag. Like if you've done ifdef, for example, you already know this. Cake defines its own, called add-in, and then you could just say cake.curl. What Cake is going to do is it's going to go into the NuGet repository, look for a package called cake.curl, and download the latest stable version of it, download it into your working directory, load the DLL, and make whatever aliases are defined in that DLL available to your script. Yeah, that's, I'm like, first time I saw it, my head exploded. However, the Cake team tells me that this is not a good way of declaring your add-ins. Why? It's a little tricky, but it's a good reason. Remember I told you this is going to download the latest stable version of whatever that package is. Now, if the package author has a breaking change, your build script might suddenly stop working because every time it goes and checks, oh, there's a new version, let's use that. And if it's a breaking change, it breaks your build. So that's not good. So it's better if you pin, what is this? Oh, wait. Okay, let's stop everything. I'm just going to buy the new version now, and I'll get back to you later. Sorry for that. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Good price, though. So, cake.curl, you don't want to just use the latest version. You want to pin down the version that you know works. So, how do you do that? Well, you pay the price in elegance, because now you can't just say this. You need to say NuGet, the protocol, and then package equals that, and then end version equals 1.2.1.0. So this is the syntax too. So what this does is that Cake is always going to get 2.1.0, no matter how many new versions there are. And if you are feeling adventurous, you could say pre-release. And that means that it's going to download whatever unstable pre-release version of that package there is. Probably not going to ever want to do that, actually. So Cake is going to take care of downloading it and make whatever aliases are in that adding available. There is one called curl upload file, which now becomes available. So the first parameter is what you want to upload. Well, I want to upload the package output path slash linker dot version dot zip. Of course, you could put this into a variable, so you don't have to specify it twice. Let me check that everything is okay. Yeah. So that's the first. Did I actually close the string? Yeah. That's the first parameter. That's what file do you want to upload. Then where do you want to upload it? Now, Azure websites have this kudu thing running, which is a piece of infrastructure which adds services on top of IIS. One of these services is a nice REST API, which you can use to deploy files onto your website. One of these endpoints that I expose is called a zip deploy endpoint. What this means, and I'm sorry, but this is not really well documented, so I actually stumbled upon it by mistake. And also my head exploded again. What you do is that you take a zip file with the contents of your application, whatever is going to be in www root. Take that file, upload it into this endpoint, and Kudu takes the zip file and packages it into the www root directory. All automatically. Just upload the zip file there, and it just unpacks it and puts the file in the right place. Go figure. Why is this not a highlighted feature? I don't know. So, what is the URL? Well, we're going to create a URI object, because it is .NET after all. And, well, the URL is this. Basically, your website URL with the SCM subdomain, which points into the Kudu website. And then you say API/zip deploy. Yeah, pretty cool. Take a zip file, upload it there, and it just unpacks it. So that's pretty nice. However, this is a secure, of course, you're going to need credentials and stuff like that in order to do that. But, the curl alias for Cake has all those properties. So we're going to create a curl settings object to define those parameters. Ooh. So first parameter is the command that you are going to use, and it's a post, because by default, if you in curl just say upload file, it's going to do a put request. And this endpoint does not support put, just post. So we're going to say use a post instead. And, well, let's just start. How much time do I have left? 20 minutes? 10 minutes? Well, let's just do everything at once. I wanted to show you everything piece by piece, but I don't have enough time. So let's just go everything at once. So the next up is the username, of course. Now you probably, and the password, now you probably do not want to paste your password in clear text into your build script. So a better way of doing it is that read those credentials from the environment, from environment variables. There is an alias for that, of course, environment variable. We're going to call it deploy user. And then we're going to say password, also environment variable, deploy password. Oops. What else do we need? Well, let's stop. Well, okay, I'll tell you. There is a problem with curl. Curl by default simply outputs whatever response it gets from the server into the standard output. So if you are unauthenticated, it's going to return with a 0 exit code, which means success, and then spit out the error page from ASP.NET in the console. So your script is going to succeed, but it didn't really publish anything. Turns out that curl has an option which says, if the HTTP server responded with something else than a 200, let's not just print the output to the standard, to the console. Let's interpret it as an error and exit with another exit code than 0, in this case 22. This super hidden option is called -- fail. I know. It's like that with the old Unix-like tools. So if you pass fail to curl, it's going to interpret the HTTP status code correctly. However, and this is a problem, the cake alias for curl does not have a property for that switch, for that option. So what do we do? Turns out that I thought about this too. Because, of course, tools can get new options, and the aliases might not support them right away as properties. So we need a way to be able to specify any option to the external tool from the cake DSL. The way you do it is that every setting class or setting object has a property called argument customization. What this takes, it takes a lambda with one argument, call it args, and this object that you get in the function has an append method where you can say -- fail, for example. And then you can say append and go on. So this is the way you pass any arbitrary argument to an external tool, even if the alias itself does not support it. So let me show you everything at once. Well, maybe I can do this. Yeah, so this is how the invocation looks like. Okay, it's pretty readable. Let's try it out from the console.
I think you have an error.
Yes.
To the line 57.
57. Okay, let's go to line 57.
Okay.
There.
No.
This is 57.
Okay,
60.
63 maybe?
63. Yeah, sorry, you're confused because of the relative line numbers over there. Yeah. Yeah, because I'm using Vim mode in VS Code, and the reason why you want those relative line numbers is that in Vim, if you want to go to this line, for example, over here, and I'm here, I can say 6 up. So I say 6 times up, but I need to see how, because I'm not going to count how many lines there are. So that's why I am. Anyway, you said 63.
So 5 down.
5, okay, 5 down from here. There.
And
Oh, yes, thanks. Nice spotted. So let's run this. Target deploy. I know, some of you, I'm missing a,
You've got an extra bracket then, because
an extra bracket. Where is it? Is it here?
Yeah.
Oh wait, isn't it that? I think this is the bracket for this. Oh wait, what line is that? 70. It's a nice trouble. Ah, it was that. What is the...
It's the close for the alias, the curl upload file is on line 4-.
Ah, yes, there it is. Thanks. Yeah. Should be right now. However, there is another thing we didn't do. We're going to find out what the thing is. Compressing. Now it's deploying. Oops. Nice. This is thanks to the --fail option that is telling me that the request I made is unauthorized. See error code 22? I don't know why. It's 22. So why do we get the error? Because we haven't declared those variables as environment variables in our session here in the console. So let's say deploy user, which is linker deployer, and then deploy password. Okay, can you all look away? And stop the recording. Okay, I think I have it here. There you go. Brackets, no brackets. Let's put the brackets in. Okay, so now I have this. I'm always paranoid with this thing. I always check. Yeah. So now I have defined them as environment variables in my session. So let's see if this time it actually compiles. You see, Cake caches the NuGet packages you download. So it's not downloading them fresh every time. Ooh, is it still unauthorized? Yeah. Because right before the talk, I changed the password. But it didn't really act when I did it. But let's see if maybe the new password, which is
much better.
Yeah, it's much better than the other one. Let's see if the new password now works. Because with cloud things, when you change something and press save, it's not really changed until sometime later. So let's see if that's the password. Should be called deploy password, right? Yeah, it's taking a while. Well, it's not fast. Yeah, it went. Yeah, so that was the password. So now let's see if this actually works for real. Let's refresh this. How much time do I have left? 5 minutes. Yes, deployed. Let's try it out. NDC London. Shorten. This is actually, no, it's not. It's still not shorter. Okay. Okay, but it actually works, I clicked on the link. Let's look at the files. Well, let's just invoke this again. Yeah, there you go. Site, www-root. Here's all our files, DLLs. And www-root has the front end. Now, for the last part, I wanted to just show you how to run this exact same process into a continuous integration server. So this is running on one agent that's running on, can you see this? Linux, yes. So that's, and we're been running this on macOS 10 this whole time. So I have a build configuration defined. Let's define one single step. That's another beauty of having your build script as a file instead of defining it into the build server. Is that you have a versioning of your build process. You can see who changed what, and you can switch continuous integration servers because they're always going to do the same thing. Invoke your build script. So let's have the command line step, which is build and deploy. Maybe I should make it bigger. And we're going to see a custom script. We're going to, from the working directory, we're basically just going to do the same thing we did here. Invoke the bootstrapper with deploy. And to save time, I already defined the two variables as environment variables in my build server. All build servers have a UI to let you define environment variables. And the beauty is, Cake can read environment variables from wherever, from your console or from a build server. Doesn't matter. And now let's change it to the new password. Yeah, that's it. Now, I better, commit those changes. By the way, let me show you that this whole entire build and deployment process is 76 lines. To take an application, compile it, run the test, version it, package it, and deploy it. Less than 100 lines of a build script, which I think is pretty good, considering what other DSL or build DSLs have you do. So let's just commit everything and say complete build process. Now I told them running a local Git server and a local team city, so no network here. So let's just push it. Oh yeah. When you push, when you are overriding, when you don't have the latest version of the source code from the server, but you really need to push your changes, you just say force push. So now we just push our build script onto the Git repository, which is being watched by this Team City instance. Let's see if it starts by itself. That would be really nice. Otherwise, let's not wait. Let's run the build. Here we can follow it in real time. Build log. There you go. Is it readable? More, maybe. There you go. Here you see, you recognize this. It's the same output we've been looking at for the past hour. Compiling the build script. It did the restore. Now it's doing the compile. Yeah, you know where this is going, I guess. Now it's already, yeah, well, we missed some. Here's the packaging. And here is the output from curl, where it's uploading the package. Everything completed. Build succeeded. Is this thing still up? It's taking a while because we changed all the files, so yeah. Okay? Same build process, run it on a continuous integration server. 76 line of C#. So, let me just wrap this up. What did we do? Well, let's not go to that slide again. Let's just sum things up. What did we do for 1 hour? We took our source code of our application written on .NET Core with C#. We ran it through a pipeline of compilation, test, packaging, and deploy. And ultimately, we deployed it to an Azure website. But this could be your own on-premise IIS observer as well. It doesn't have to be Azure. Because it turns out that you can run Kudu outside Azure. Because it's just a ASP.NET web application that runs on top of your website. So you can install Kudu outside of your IIS as well. And then we took the same process and ran it on a continuous integration server, which happened to be Team City, but could be anything. For the cross-platform part, we did the development of the build script on a Mac. We ran it continuously on Linux, and the application itself was running on Windows. Okay? Of course, you can mix and match these as you like. You could be developing that on Windows, or running it on Linux again, because that's the only kind of server you should be running, and deploy it on Azure. By the way, let me tell you this. If you are running VS Code on Windows and install the Cake extension, you get IntelliSense. Because I don't know if you noticed, but I didn't have any IntelliSense here. And I've done this enough times that I know what the names are. But IntelliSense really helps. Unfortunately, it doesn't work on Linux or Mac yet. It just works on .NET Core on Windows. So there is that. But I, of course, support for the other OSs will come. So if you want to look at the source code for this linker application with the build script, a more complete one with more things in it, you can find the address here. And if you want to learn more about how to use Cake to build and deploy your application, I have a Pluralsight course called Building and Deploying Applications with Cake. I removed the applications because it didn't fit. So it's actually called Building and Deploying Applications with Cake. But here is the short URL for that. We might have 1 minute for questions, but first let me thank you for your attention. So questions, yes. Excuse me, sir. You need a microphone. Yeah, there you go. Thanks.
What about application settings like connection strings, different for different environments?
Okay, so the question is, do I have to repeat the question? No, because it was in a...
Should be on the mic, so-
Yeah, okay, that's good. So connection string and things like that, you handle it out. It's the external tool that you're using, in this case MS-Build, that will probably do the web config transformations, for example. So you handle that outside of Cake. You just let Cake invoke MS-Build, and MS-Build then does the config transformations. However, there are aliases to do config transformations in the build in Cake, as there is an alias that just runs the transformation. So you can do that either way. Either you let an external tool handle it, or you implement it inside of your Cake script. Yeah. Next question? Yes. There was another question on the back. I think the gentleman left. Maybe still. Sorry, the question from before, the hand that went up, is the hand still here? No. It didn't wait. Okay.
Is it possible to inject other variables into those the build step rather than apart from the environment variables, such as if I want to inject like build numbers, like build counter, as to increment?
Okay, so the first part is the way you can get variables from the outside world into your Cake script is through arguments, like we did. So you define arguments, and then you can pass different values for those arguments from the outside. If you need to read, for example, the build counter, most continuous integration servers have that information as an environment variable.
Okay, so you just read from the...
You read it, and in TeamCity it's called build_count or build_number, for example.
Okay.
Yeah, but I should say that TeamCity has built-in aliases to interact with the build servers as well. So for TeamCity, you say TeamCity dot, and then you have a number of methods you can call, for example, to publish your package as an artifact of the build, for example, or setting the build number. Those are all methods that are part of the TeamCity alias that's built into Cake.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Next question. Yes.
How extensible is Cake? Is it a strict superset of C#, or do you need to implement whatever for custom functionality?
You're talking about add-ins, or are you talking about expanding your build script?
I mean, if we need to make add-ins, or if you can program pretty
This is just, so let me show you, this is a great question. This is just C#. So if you want to make some more complicated steps that you don't want to have inside a task, for example. So let me get rid of this, this one here. So you can define other Cake scripts, auxiliary Cake scripts. For example, for the version, I have one called version.cake, which just declares a static method, which does the XML pick in this case. Then the way you refer it into your build script is that you use another preprocessor directive called load, and then you say version.cake. So you can break out your build script into multiple files, which is a good idea because otherwise it's going to grow. And in those files, you simply declare either methods or, for example, you notice that I'm repeating a lot this path all over the place as strings. what I normally do is that I have a paths cake file which defines a class with properties for the common path that I'm going to use in my application, in my build script. And then from my cake script, I can simply say, for example, instead of saying this, I will say path.project file.
All right, thanks, cool.
Yeah. Thanks. Yes, next question.
Last question.
Thank you. How do you pass parameters to your task? Meaning, I want to build, debug, or release.
Yeah, I know. It's a very good question. As far as I know, you can't. I also wish I could pass parameters to the task or invoke a task from a task instead of using run target. And right now, it's not built into the DSL. So that's one thing. But you mentioned that you wanted to pass, for example,
Debug or release.
yeah, so, okay, so this is just a C# program, so it's being compiled with the Rosling. So if you're gonna do different things depending on the configuration, you can always say if debug, like that.
I was thinking about building the pipeline for debug.
Oh, yes,
Building the pipeline
all right.
for release.
Yeah, so that's a parameter, and that's actually defined in the bootstrapper as well. So you say configuration, and then you say configuration, and then you can say the default is debug or the default is release. And then in this case, in .NET Core build, you can say new .NET Core build settings, and one of the properties is configuration, and you say configuration. All right?
Cool. Thanks.
And all of the .NET Core tools have this configuration option. Yeah. We don't have time for more questions. All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.